Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of Blood on the Razor Wire TV. Hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button. This is where we bring it real and we bring it raw. The other day I made a video interview with Mao Mao. Keepa was sentenced to 55 years at the age of 20 years old, went to federal prison, started out as a young man, went to dangerous places, and thought he would never get out of prison. Eventually, the law changed with the First Step Act with President Donald J. Trump. And Kepa was able to get out of prison under the Compassionate Release Statute. He had stacked 924C counts. And what that does is they give you 5 years for the first count, which is possession of a firearm in furtherance of a drug trafficking crime and or a crime of violence. The second one is 25 years on top of the 5. And the third is another 25 years on top of the 5 and the 25. That's how Kepa ended up with the 55-year sentence. Some people have reached out to me over that video and they've said, hey, that video made me cry. It affected me. Some people reached out and said, why would you interview that guy so close to getting out of prison? And that brings me to making this video. Why did I interview Mao Mao right after he got out of prison? The reason why I did that is because I want people to see the effects of incarceration to our youth. And when I say youth, some people have wrote and said he wasn't a kid, but he really was a kid. He was 20 years old. And I don't even think he was 20 years old mentally when he went to prison. I think he was in the age range of 14 to 15 years old mentally. And he was facing a 55-year sentence. In his young mind, Kepa felt like he was never going to get out of prison. Mao Mao seen things that no man should have to see, especially a 20-year-old. No man, no young man, no child. And what do I mean by that? I mean the things that he said, that he became numb to people being stabbed in prison. He became numb to watching people be murdered. You know, in a civilized society, that sounds outrageous. That somebody could become numb to watching someone be stabbed to death in prison with a prison shank. It happens all too often. It affects people mentally, emotionally. Sometimes it makes you feel sad. Sometimes it makes you feel depressed. At other times you feel angry. Sometimes you want to lash out. But the one thing in federal prison, when you're sitting in a maximum security federal prison, and I'm sure in maximum security state prisons is, you have to keep your mouth shut. You can't attach yourself. You can't help people that you might want to help. You might see someone that you kick it with get stabbed. And you're like, damn, I kick it with that dude and I want to help that dude. But that dude might be in another car. He might be in another gang. You can't step in. You can't go help that guy. You just can't do that. And I say that to say this. I talk about Dog in my book, and I actually interviewed Dog, Gilbert Stites from New Jersey, where he had an incident. And I didn't know what car he was in, but I liked him. I talked to him all the time. He was an Irish dude. He was from Jersey. I was from New York. But because we were in separate cars, when he got stabbed, I couldn't help him. And I talk about that in my book, in Blood on the Razor Wire. I couldn't step out there and go help Dog. Because if I were to do so, I could have jeopardized my own life. He wasn't in my car. He wasn't my homeboy. He was my homeboy because he was from Jersey. I was from New York. But there just wasn't that connection. There wasn't that prison connection where I could jump out the door and help him. And the whole time that I was in prison, I spent 17 years, 5 months, and 21 days in prison. And, you know, when I started this YouTube channel, I told people that, you know, I bring something different to the table. Some people on these YouTube channels, and no disrespect to them, you got some really good content out there, but a lot of them can't tell the story that I can tell. But why is that? That's because they've never been the places that I've been. Most of them haven't served nearly 20 years in prison. Most of them haven't been in some of the most dangerous federal prisons in the country, if not the most dangerous. And that's why I say when I bring my content, it's real and it's raw. And that brings me back to Mao Mao. When we go back and we think about Mao Mao and having him on the channel, I wanted you to see the effects of incarceration. I wanted these younger kids that are, out of control, that are out here doing robberies and stabbing people or shooting people. I want them to see what prison does to you. I want them to see the part that isn't glamorized. I want them to see the part where people really die in these places, not just physically, but mentally. Keppa, like myself, we see people murdered in prison. This takes me back to an incident where there was a guy that was getting ready to go home and he made another guy check in. And for those of you that don't know what checking in is, it means that they send a guy up top. They tell him, hey, look, you got to go. If you don't, we're going to kill you. If you don't, we're going to stab you. So they check this guy in. He was a blood out of California. They check him in. The guy's down there. He's checked in. The administration sends him back on the compound. They said, look, you got to go back. So this guy goes back. His name was Lair Dog. So Lair Dog goes back to the compound. He gets back on the compound. His homeboys surround him, including one of the guys that had 90 days left to go home. They surround him. They tell him he's got to check in. Well, Lair Dog had a different plan. Lair Dog had a knife. And he said, I'm not going back. And what happened was Lair Dog stabbed the dude in the chest that was supposed to be going home in 90 days. But that man there, he never made it home. He died right on that concrete. Lair Dog had stabbed him dead in the heart. And I watched this with my own eyes. And I seen the guy jump back, put his hands up like a boxer, like he was ready to fight. And he bounced around for about 13 seconds on his toes. Might have threw a jab or two. And then he fell to the ground. And I watched him die. I watched him take his last breath in a federal prison. I watched him die on the concrete. And I'm sure that the warden had to call his mother and say, I'm sorry to tell you that your son, your 25-year-old son, is not coming home from prison. He's not coming home from prison because he tried to check a dude in and dude stabbed him in the chest. These are the things that we witness. These are the things that we see in federal prison. And I always say this, man, federal prison isn't the place that some people out here in the free world think it is. It's not all tennis courts and steaks and shrimp and pool tables and all this good stuff that people think we have. Federal prison is a dangerous place. It's a dungeon of pain. It's a place of loneliness, a place of misery, desperation. And that's what you see on Mao Mao's face. He was released from prison. He was happy to be free. But you've seen the pain in his face. You've seen it in the way that he spoke. You've seen the loneliness, the desperation, the fear. Maybe you've seen the hope for a better tomorrow. And in his young mind, because his mind is still young, he probably doesn't know what's going on out here. He doesn't know if he's ever going to go back to prison. He doesn't know if he's ever going to recover from watching people be murdered. But I can tell you this, that there are people, including myself, that have been reaching out to other people to get Mao Mao some support, to get him some help, perhaps some counseling. He has the best federal criminal attorney in the country. His attorney is a former federal judge, John Gleason. He was a judge for 22 years. Prior to that, he was the guy they called in to prosecute John Gotti because none of the other prosecutors could get him. But John Gleason prosecuted him and he was found guilty. And then he later went on to become a federal judge. So these people are involved in Mao Mao's life and they're trying to help him because we can all recognize that Mao Mao needs some help. And I want to bring Mao Mao back on the show in 3 months, and then again in 6 months, and again in 9 months, to see how he's progressing, to see how Mao Mao's doing. If you have a son, if you have a daughter that are going down the wrong road, they should watch the Mao Mao video. Watch that interview. Watch and see how stabbings in prison affected that young man. But it wasn't just the stabbings that affected him probably. Probably had a lot to do with that 55-year sentence that the federal government handed down to a 20-year-old. 20 years old with a 55-year sentence. What did his young mind go through when he was sentenced to 55 years? What did he think about on that day when the judge banged that gavel and told him pretty much, you're going to prison, a young man, and you will likely die in prison? And that's the problem. Some of you have seen the movie Shawshank Redemption. And when you watch that movie, Remember the old man that got out of prison after all those years and he just couldn't make it. He took his own life. Now that was just a movie, right? But it's our reality. It's the reality of sending young men to prison for 30 or 40 years and then releasing them. The federal government is supposed to have a mission where they want you to be rehabilitated and come back to society and have a successful reentry. But how does a 20-year-old go to prison for 30 or 40 years and get out and ever be successful? How is social integration even possible after serving that much time? These young men will come home without mothers, without fathers, without family. They'll all be gone. They'll all be dead. I'm sure Mao Mao contemplated that. Mao Mao thought that was his fate, that he would die in prison or get out at an age when he could do nothing positive with his life. But now he's here. Now he's here. Now he has that second chance to reclaim his life. What will he do with it? We could help out, or we could allow him to fail. I can promise you that I will not allow Mao Mao to fail. I will do everything in my power to help Mao Mao, to help push him, to help him get a job, push him to get some counseling that he clearly needs. This is real. This is raw content. Some people might not like it. Some people might not like the rawness of what it was like to watch Mao Mao in an interview and freeze up. But what you've seen was his PTSD. We talk about the military, people having PTSD in the military, but you've just seen the effects of PTSD in prisoners, federal prisoners, state prisoners. When you see Mao Mao, you see the 2.1 million people that are incarcerated in this country. When you see Mao Mao, you see the reality. You see the rawness. You see it real. And that's why I brought Mao Mao on the show. Because I wanted you to see it. I wanted your son to see it. I wanted your young daughter who's heading down the wrong road to see it. And hopefully we can see the changes for positive. The changes down a path where Mao Mao gets a little better with each passing day. That's what we're hoping for. And that's what I'm dedicated to doing. It's my obligation. That's why this channel's here. Yeah, we talk about violence on the channel because it's real, because it's raw, because it's something that we have to talk about. It's something that we have to face. It's the story that brings the kids that are on the wrong path. Because unfortunately, they're fascinated by prison. Unfortunately, they're fascinated by violence. They're fascinated by death. But we have to show them the other side. We have to show them the other side of prison, the other side of the fascination. We have to show them the side that's real, the side that's raw. We have to show them what it's like to go to bed hungry at night. We have to show them what it's like not to ever talk to your parents again. We got to show them what it's like to be dealing with a sentence where you got till the sun burns out in prison and how it affects you mentally. And hopefully it's that message that changes their path. Hopefully it's that message that puts them on the right path. And like I always say, it's real and it's raw. It's Blood on the Razor Wire TV. Until tomorrow, we're out of here.